Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland. In this episode, we will be reviewing the P1 Cockpit from the guys at RSeat, a heavy-duty unit with all manufacturing done in-house at their facility in Bulgaria. Constructed from heavy steel plate and plenty of welding in all the right places. Can this prefabricated cockpit deliver a solid, stiff ride? Time to put it through the SRG's review process and see how it does. So, let's get to it. So here is the P1 cockpit from RSeat. And you can see here that I have two major elements laid out here. The piece that you see here with the roll bar-like top wheelbase support is the piece that comes out of the box, just like this. So it's pre-assembled to that point. And we'll roll over here and take a look at this. This is a 2-inch or 50 millimeter diameter tubing on this front support here for the wheelbase. It's very sturdy. Right out of the box, when I was picking this up and taking it out of the box, it felt like it was welded onto the frame down there because there was just no flex anywhere detected. Also, the wheelbase support's already pre-assembled on here and clamped down tightly, so I couldn't move that either. It's very, very stiff. The bottom or main base section here is a boxed steel configuration, similar to what you'll see on pickup trucks on the back part of them where the bed is mounted to. So I like that they've gone that way with it. It is an 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter thick steel plate that they're using here. And remember, all this stuff is done in-house at RSeat. They do all their pipe bending, they do all their welding, all their fabrication. So yeah, the quality control is very good on this right out of the box. And speaking of the box, and I usually don't talk about packaging and things, but the packaging was very good on this system. Everything that came out of the boxes, there was no damage, nothing was bent or dented, something scratched, anything like that. They did a superb job at packaging such heavy materials because this stuff is heavy. This is a brute as far as the weight goes on all these pieces. This plate steel is not light. And that's going to give us good mass and I'm assuming very good stiffness properties to the assembly. So yeah, hats off to them for being able to ship this stuff to me because every other prefab cockpit that I've ever gotten has had some damage to it because the packaging just wasn't up to par. Anyway, so yeah, having everything made in the factory where you have quality control over every step of the way is a very good thing, and it shows in this result here. Now I'm going to get a little closer here on these pieces here on the bottom frame. Now we have a spreader here. Now this is not completely boxed in, but it is boxed in all the way through for the side rails. And they have very nice looking welds here on both sides, and the welds continue on around and underneath. And we don't have a weld on this side, but when you have that much welding, I can see why they didn't do that. Now also throughout this chassis and the assembly process, we'll be seeing them a lot. We have these inserted M8 threaded pieces here. Now those are stamped in with a special tool into the metal, and they usually do a good job of holding. I haven't had any of them come loose on me when I'm tightening things down, but that's always a fear of mine when you get this type of thing instead of just a bolt through it and then a nut on the other side. But we'll see how that goes as we assemble it. Now you can see these pieces on the bottom will give us a better look at how that stamped piece looks. And I guess you can see it there. It's hard for me to tell on the monitor, but there's a little raised area in that gets folded back when it gets stamped in, kind of like a rivet, if you will. So we have one of these here, we have one on the back, and we've got the same thing at the front corners up front here. And those are for the feet of this chassis. And that'll be the first thing I'm putting on here, by the way, because this assembly is so heavy already. Yeah, I want to go ahead and get the feet on it before I even attempt to put this thing over here on there. This thing's like almost 50 pounds by itself, this section here, the floorboard with the pedal tray on top of it, which is a sliding pedal tray. And that goes up here on this front part of the assembly. I'll show you how they've done this. So they've welded these bars onto the front here, and we're going to be putting a bolt up from the bottom here into the bottom, and I'll show you a little bit more of that when we get to it, of the rail that they have there that everything is sitting on. And then we also have a hole in that same rail over there that's going to allow us to get a bolt into this hole here, which is of course already threaded with the insert. nothing is, I can tap on things, nothing's vibrating, there's no shaking. This is one solid unit. And you can see it's got some really pretty welds here. They do a good job with that. Whoever their welder is doing a great job. And over here you can see how this roll bar like assembly is put together. And we can see some of the welds in here. Very nice powder coating on here. Just very well done. And we have a cutout for the RSeat here in the side of it. And we have another one on the other side that matches. This is, again, a rather neon green, a very loud color here. But it's kind of growing on me, actually. And they've got different colors you can get. I think there's a red and there's a blue or something like that. But yeah, very nice powder coat finish on this. Now, this bar is, again, supporting the wheelbase. And you see that's already mounted here. And we've got lots of holes here to mount different wheelbases, too. And I'm not sure which wheelbase I'm going to be running yet, but we'll get there when we get there. But you can see it has some slots in here. And we'll look at this closer when we're actually adjusting the wheelbase and doing other things. And we have some holes here. We can raise the angle here. These slots are kind of angled also, so it kind of drops when it goes. It looks like there's going to be a lot of adjustability in here, so it shouldn't be a problem. Again, very nicely finished, very securely attached. Again, we were picking this up, this whole chassis piece here, up by the handle. We're using this as a handle on the front part of it, so, and it didn't flex. There was nothing moved. So just dragging it out of the box, I was going, yeah, this feels pretty solid. And again, on the side here, you can see our through holes. And we have, again, these inserts, threaded inserts, where all of our other goodies are going to go that we got with this cockpit. And we'll get to those when we get there. So what I'm going to do is, before I go over here and talk about this element, we're going to get the feet on. All right? So the feet are pretty simple units, and we're going to go over those before I put them on. Let's take a look at the fasteners and tools and things that come with your cockpit. Now, they give you a nice little hex set here. Nothing special here, kind of a generic kind of thing, but it's nice that I think that they actually give you a set. So if you need to use them during your assembly, you can. They also give you a 17 millimeter wrench. Seems to be of decent quality. Doesn't have any branding on it though. It does say drop forged. And we have a couple of 13 millimeter gadget wrenches. Still has the gadget tag on it. And you're going to need two because of the bolting situation that we have here. There's several different styles of bolts. We'll look at this one first. And all the M8 nuts on these are nylock. You can see the blue nylock element in there. And this is a 15 millimeter long hex head bolt. And it is a 13 millimeter, the same as the nylock nut. So if you're going to assemble these two together, then you're going to need two of these 13 millimeter wrenches to get that done. So that's something to keep in mind when you're doing that. So anyway, we also have some other size bolts. For the M8s, we have two sizes. We have a 30 millimeter, rather long socket head cap unit. And we have a 20 millimeter socket head cap unit. And we have a M6 bolt here, also socket head cap. They also give us some washers, assorted washers for these where they need to be applied. You get a bag of these. It comes with your cockpit, and within this bag was what we're going to be doing next, the feet. And this is what the feet look like. They have these little plastic, hard plastic pieces on them. They're not really rubbery. And there is a socket inside of here that, as we actually can flex this a little bit, make it go off angle like that. So that gives us the freedom of movement if we need that. So it's nice that they have a little ball piece in there. Other than that, nothing extraordinary here. This is a 10 millimeter nut. It's at the bottom of the threaded rod part. And this is an M8 rod. It's in here. So yeah, I'm thinking that once this is in there, that it might let us turn this nut piece here without turning the foot with the weight on it. I'm not sure. Because of the pivot point in there, it might be able to do that. May not. We just have to wait and see. But yeah, the only thing is, this is a relatively small size foot for this rig. I'm sure they've tested them and they work fine. It's just, I was expecting something a little bit wider maybe. to fit underneath that. Not that there's going to be a lot of movement if it's a static rig. I mean, unless you put motion on it, then when you put motion on it, you're not going to use them anyway. So yeah, it's just one of those things that I notice when I'm looking at things. I'm thinking, that is a kind of a smallish foot for such a largish, heavy rig. But I'm sure it's going to work out fine. If it doesn't, you guys will be the first to know. What else? I think that's about it. We're going to put these feet on next, by the way. I just want to show you some of the hardware we're going to be using. Pretty simple stuff here. Nothing complicated. And of course, the feet that we're going to be putting on next. Again, if you saw the closer look segment, then you know that these are going to be the first thing I put on that chassis because it's very heavy right out of the box, just the chassis bar at the base. And I want to go ahead and get the feet on it before I start adding other things, and it's going to get heavier and heavier. So this is going to be going on next. It's very simple, and we're going to go over there and mount these and see how it goes. So we're back with the chassis on the floor. Go ahead and get down here so you guys can see the feet are firmly attached now. One down there, and we have one over here. And you can see some of the exposed nut piece of the foot. And again, those are 10 millimeter nuts. So we're going to use a 10 millimeter wrench to adjust the height if we need to. And they went in pretty easily into the 8 millimeter inserts that have been riveted into the chassis already. If you saw the closer look, you've already seen that. We're going to do a little cutaway here, and I can show you how I did this. Real simple. I just had a 2x4 board laying around. Went ahead and put that under the chassis, and then that gave me enough clearance to slide the foot along the ground there, or the floor, and it cleared the insert, and then just start screwing it in. Pretty simple. It went in pretty good. The threads don't have any kind of paint or powder coat on them, so everything's screwed in pretty well. And yeah, once you're finished screwing it in, it's just a matter of pulling the wood back out and we're good to go. Now I did screw all these feet in as far as they would go because I wanted them all the way in, because if anything, I'll be backing them out if I need to level this chassis somehow. So they're all screwed all the way in from the start. And you can see the bottoms there. And again, good shot of the rivet, that M8 insert, and the other one over there. So we're good to go. Now we can start proceeding with our build, which will be next is our pedal tray floorboard assembly. And when we come back, we'll take a look at what it's going to take to get this piece bolted onto the front of this piece. So here's our floorboard pedal tray assembly. And it comes out of the box just like this. Everything's pre-assembled. And I have it upside down because I want to show you some holes in it and how we're going to be mounting it to the holes over here on the base chassis assembly. First, we'll look at this. We have a set of inserts in the back of these square pieces of 3 millimeter thick steel. So we got two here. Obviously, we're going to have two over here. And we have a couple of holes up here. Now, the middle hole here is unusable. There's no access underneath there. Even though I can get my hand in there, it's sealed off with these welds here. So there's no getting a bolt in that. But we don't need it because we're just going to be putting a bolt into the front holes depending on where we put that, as far as we want a short reach or we want a long reach. See what I mean by that? Let's go back over here. And they explain this well in the instructions. If I mount this front threaded hole into the front non-threaded hole over here, using a bolt obviously coming up from underneath on this piece, then that's going to be in the short mode. And I'm 5'8", so I think I'm going to put it in that first. I mean, we do still have the slider down here, and we'll talk about the pedal tray and slider once we get everything mounted. If you want a longer reach, then you have this one here. And this is around 5 inches between the centers here. So that gives you another 5 inches of reach, plus whatever the pedal tray will do on its sliding track here that they put on here. You can see the front rod there for controlling that. Now, to get to these holes, first off, I got access to these holes, but I don't have access to these holes with the floorboard right here already attached. So I'm going to have to pull that off to get access, and you can see there's some cutouts here. And there's another one on this side down here that once this floorboard is off, I'll have free access to those holes. And so that's what we're going to do next. When we come back, we're going to pull the floorboard off and see what we're looking at. So now I have our floorboard / pedal tray assembly flipped back over, so I have access to the socket head cap bolts that are holding this aluminum diamond plate floorboard on here. And this is a nice piece that they give you with the kit. It's something that you don't get with just about any kit I've seen so far. And a floorboard is nice. If you use your cockpit a lot, it's nice to be able to just step on the floorboard, especially if it's elevated, you have some kind of suspension going on or anything like that. Nice to be able to just step into the floorboard. Now, these are socket head cap bolts in here, and I'm going to pull them all off, and then we'll go ahead and see what we have. All right, we've got all our bolts out, and this is what they look like. Socket head cap units. Focus on this. You can do it. Here we go. And they look to be about 20 millimeters long. So, now that we had them out, we can remove, hopefully, the floorboard. And there it goes. And it goes all the way up under there, as you can see. It has this lip on the front of it. And of course, we had the bent side pieces on it. Again, 3 millimeter or 1/8 inch aluminum. Not as stiff as you would think in hand, but that makes sense to me because really the stiffness is coming from when we put it back on here and when we have it securely mounted to this frame. And these are just M8 inserts, just like we've seen all through the chassis and we'll continue to see. Once we have it bolted down nice and tight, then all this surface area is going to support it, and that's what makes it feel stiff when you're stepping on it. Now, one thing I would like to see here, even though I like socket head caps, they're stronger than the button heads. Sometimes a button head is a good thing to have if maybe your foot would be in the way. Maybe not for the front pieces up here, but for the back ones, you might want to put a button head M8 in here so it's a little bit flatter. It doesn't stick up as much as these socket head caps do. At least that's the way I would do it. Just a note. Right, now that we've got it off, all I have to do is take this assembly over to the base cockpit and put it on the holes where I want it to be. Remember, I'm going to set this up in the short reach because I'm only 5'8", and we'll see how that works out. Come back, we'll take a look at it. We're back with the pedal tray floorboard assembly securely mounted to our bottom chassis piece now. And it went just like I thought it would. The holes lined up very well. Didn't have to move things around or shake anything as I was starting the bolts, and I'll give you guys some B-roll while I'm talking about that. The bolts went in quite well, and you can see these are the cutouts I was talking about. You can get a better view of them to give us access to those socket head cap bolts. And these are M8, just like it come in the kit. And yeah, M8 20 millimeter long. And I did use some washers on here. It doesn't really call for the washers in the instructions, but it looks like in the pictures they had them. And it seems like we have a lot of washers. I went ahead and put them in there. So yeah, get these in, and then we tighten them down with our wrench, and it is now securely attached. We'll go around to the front, and I'll show you on this side. Of course, we're coming from the bottom up, and I'll give you some B-roll showing you how these go in. First, we'll take a look at it and see if we can see them. And let's see, it's down here. There it is. One there, and we have the other one over there. Again, just getting underneath upside down, and the bolts went in quite well. Again, everything lined up without a hitch. No dramas here. Everything went quite smoothly. And of course, once we're finished, we just torque these front ones down too, and we're done. All we have to do now is come back and get the floorboard put back on, which is sitting over there. And again, those are those 4 M8 bolts that we took off to get access to our holes there that allowed us to do this mounting. So there it is. Pretty simple. Again, this stuff is very easy. I like the way everything goes together quite well. The measurements and machining are done quite well on this rig because I haven't had to, move anything around or try to jiggle things as I was putting in, which a lot of times in these kind of cockpits, if I had to do that. But yeah, so far so good. Now that I've got the pedal tray assembly attached and I have the floorboard reattached, let's take a look at how this pedal tray is working. First off, we'll see that there's a lot of different holes on this pedal tray. And they're cut out for Fanatec, the usual suspects, Thrustmaster, Logitech, all that will fit. It's got slots in here that are centered or have centers that should fit the Husingveld style pedals, depending, of course, on what their centers are on their flanges. But it should mount okay. I'm going to be mounting something different if I can. I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing yet, so I don't know where I'll be. The other adjustment is the angle adjustment. You can see I have it pretty high right now. It's at its extreme limit. And the way you adjust this thing, it's pretty easy. I got some B-roll to show you me adjusting. Once you loosen up the front bolts, and those are right here, the ones going into the side, not the one hanging down there on the bottom of the tray, but the one on the tray flange. And we have another one back here that has 6 holes in it. The 6 holes are spaced at 15 millimeters, or about 1.25 inches, which should give you, I think, from my experiences anyway, the angle that you want, considering which pedal set that you'll be using. So again, very easy to do this. You remove the bolt and then adjust the angle you want, and then of course just reapply the bolt. You can see this bolt's not all the way in because I've been playing with it. I will tighten that. Well, I'm going to bring it back down flat anyway, but I wanted to show you the bolt as it was kind of hanging out there. And you can take pressure off the tray because this side flange here is putting weight on that bolt. It's not going to come out real fat or real loosely or easy unless you take some weight off of it on this big plate here. Speaking of this plate assembly, let's take a look at this. The way they've done this is they've got an inch square tube here, or about 25, 26 millimeters, and they've bent that. And when they bend this, they use a cool system here where they cut these pieces on their laser cutter. And this is a straight 1-inch tube before they start. And they also cut in their little logo in there. So they cut these slots. So when they bend the tube, and they cut it on the inside too, obviously, they cut a chunk out of that. So when they bend this tube, and this is a 90-degree bend, it won't kink up on the inside and it won't stretch out over here. So it allows it to do that without stressing the metal. Important for long-lasting pieces, and something that we're going to be putting a lot of pressure on, banging away on the pedals. So if I can show you here, see if my light here with that, if I can get down here low enough and point back up. There's a pattern they cut out on this. It has a tab on it and a slot. So when they bend this together, those meet. And that helps hold things together, or keeps things straight, centered, if you will. So when they do the welding, it doesn't move while it's sitting in the welding jig. Speaking of welds, we've got plenty here. We've got a couple here across this, another piece of 1-inch square tube. And where they weld the tube to the main frame here, this big tube, or rather the long tube that they bent into a square, it also welds to the top plate. We also have a weld over here for the top plate. We have welds across that for the top plate. And of course, another one back there. And you can see also in the bottom, same thing's happening. And we also have on the bottom, you can see there's a weld in the middle there. And that's where they've actually joined the tube, the one-piece tube, after they finished all the bending. So we have a weld there too. And of course, on the other side of this tube, we've got a couple of welds. And over here on the top, hard for me to get an angle on that, but we got same welds over here that we have down there. I counted all the welds here, and again on the side down over here. And we've got 16 welds holding this plate to this piece here. And it feels very solid. As you might imagine, I don't have any fears of this thing moving or flexing. It should be very solid. Of course, we're going to find out. But because of the construction and the way they did this, and the experience I have in these kind of things, I would have to say that, yeah, this is going to be a very solid base to mount it to. And again, I kind of expect this thing from RSeat because of the price structures that these things come in at. Right. Now, the piece down here, obviously, this is a slider. So we can actually adjust, and I'm going to show you some B-roll of that. You can adjust the slider by pulling this up, just like on a seat. And then we can slide this back and forth. Now, this is pretty tight. It's not like real loose when I'm sliding it, which I think is a good thing. Some might not agree with that. But yeah, I don't want the thing sliding too freely and having a lot of lash in between the gears where they engage down here in the slider mechanisms. I want them to be pretty tight, and they are. And it's not easy to move this. Of course, it might be easier once we get a set of pedals, a heavier set of pedals, mounted to this plate up here, then it might slide a little bit easier. But it does work, and it's good to have something that you can easily adjust the pedals, especially if you have multiple people using the cockpit, or you have a lot of friends coming over that want to try it. It's easy to adjust the pedal reach for them. Right. So again, everything's very solid here. Again, the bottom tube that's holding, this is like an 1.5-inch tube that's holding the whole platform here, which is the slider assembly. Of course, the plate and our floorboard over there we've already seen. And again, you can see here how they laser cut these corners. And then there's that pattern again. Might see it a little easier at this angle. I'm not sure. Kind of hard to catch it with the light, but there it is. That little notch and groove pattern they use. And we have a weld over here on the other side of it. So far, this looks pretty good as far as how it's going to perform in the pedal tray section. But then again, we don't know for sure until we get in and we're using it. Here are the Mecha couplement pedal set now attached to the pedal tray. And the best way to do this to attach anything is to remove the pedal tray from the slider assembly. And it's pretty easy. You don't have to remove the side panel here, this little side bracket. All you have to do is go in and get these 3 M8 bolts from each side. One there, one in the middle, and then one over there in the front. And then this whole plate assembly will come off. And then you can take it and get underneath as far as access to the bolts is much easier when you do it that way. I don't know how well this is going to show, but it's pretty tight in here. Let me see if I can get this to light up enough to show you that. But yeah, it's pretty tight in here trying to get your hands in here to get to these bolts. And this particular set of pedals, I have a bolt on either side of the cross brace that's going underneath here that you just saw. So we have to get on either side of it. Anyway, it's pretty tight, and I don't have the largest hands in the world, and I was having trouble. So yeah, just 3 bolts on each side. Lift this whole plate up, and then you can access. I put it on my counter over there, and yeah, it was much easier. Now, there is an interference issue with some pedal sets. Now, the usual pedal sets like the Logitechs, the Thrustmasters, things like that don't have any problem. Plenty of access underneath. The monitor mount also, when I'm showing you these other pedals, the R7s wouldn't fit. The monitor mount interferes because it's sticking down pretty far. The Mecha cups without the mounting spacers under the base would just barely fit, but the mounting holes didn't line up. My Simtrex would not work with their base. And of course, unfortunately, I couldn't mount the Simtrex to the plate itself or the tray itself because there was no hole pattern to match what I needed. 2 of the pedals would fit, but the brake was wider than the other 2, the throttle and clutch, so I just couldn't find holes that would fit that, so we couldn't use those. But we did find something for the Mechas. You know, for the Husingvelds, those type of pedals, that would probably fit okay. My Simtrex are just a little bit different, but yeah, so not all pedal sets are going to fit this tray without some modification. Though, if you buy something like this, drilling a hole here and there is really not a big deal, at least in my book, to get the pedals I want mounted. Now, the interference part with this piece down here, the monitor mount, this could be resolved. You know, it's a little bit short, I think, for this roll bar assembly. If they could raise this up, make it 60 millimeters taller than it is, then I would be able to use any pedal set, no problem. And it can be taller. I wouldn't have to worry about my wheelbase being too tall because you can see how high I have that already. And the monitor mount itself, you can see where my monitor is. It's up here on the top part. So with it taller, another 60 millimeters, it'd be easy enough because we got lots of adjustment here. You can see these slots here left in this monitor mount. And we've obviously got a lot we can do with the motor mount too to bring it lower if we need it. So yeah, a little bit higher roll bar assembly here, I think would be the trick. And I'd like to see them do that. But anyway, this is what I ended up with, and that's what we'll be using. The next thing I want to put on the cockpit is the seat slider assembly. And this has several different parts to it. We have a bottom mounting flange that has an L shape to it. See if I can show you that here on the bottom. So this is an L-shaped flange here. Obviously, we need the L to attach the bottom of our seat slider assembly. And then we have another piece on top of it that is attached to the top part of the seat slider assembly. And that is going to support the seat. So this is where we're going to attach it to the chassis over there you see in the background. And if you've been following so far, you know that that chassis over there has some M8 threaded inserts that are spaced just for this. And we also have a connecting plate in the top here that connect these 2 plates together. Now, all of this plate is almost 4.5 millimeters in thickness, which is around 3/16 of an inch. So very substantial. Like the rest of this, that's, the theme here with all this stuff that's come from RSeat is heavy duty stuff. It's very heavy. It's thick steel plate. And yeah, everything you touch here has got a lot of quality feel to it, if you will, because of the way it's constructed. So, and again, this is a very heavy assembly in its own right, just with the slider and the way that we're going to support the seats. Now, on the top of this, let me flip this back around. We have a place that we're going to be mounting our seat rails. There we go. And you can see there's multiple holes here for mounting the seat brackets, although I think only just one set of the holes is going to line up for the seat rails you see over there, and we'll look at that in a second, for these seat rails here. But we can move them back and forth, and they are slots, so it does give us an opportunity with the slots here to be able to move it back and forth, depending on the width of our seat that we're going to be using. I'm going to be using RSeat's entry-level seat, they call it. So it's not one of the expensive Sparcos or anything like that. I haven't even opened it, so I'm not even sure what it looks like. But we're going to open that, obviously, before we put it on here, and I'll show you what that looks like. So everything's ready to go as one unit here. And, of course, the general idea is we're going to be taking these 20 millimeter M8 bolts that come in your package of bolts you see over there. And we're just going to be sticking one of them in this hole. And that's going to go in the insert for the M8 bolt that we already have in the chassis over there in that box tube frame. And we'll have another one over here. And we'll have, of course, two of them over here. Now, I'm putting a washer on this, even though it really doesn't call for it in the instructions. I'm putting a washer on this one. And I'm putting a washer on all the ones that I can, as long as it doesn't affect the reach of the thread that I need, as far as the depth into the other threaded piece, our insert. Now, let's take a look at this right here. This is what comes with. I can show it here. I can show it over here. I can show it over here. All right. In fact, let me turn this around and use this piece. These are directional pieces, so they're not like universal. You can flip them either way. Turn this way. So this is the way it's going to look. And of course, they've got their little sticker on there. It says P1, which is the top of the line chassis that we have here. And you can see there's two sets of holes in the bottom of this. And we have 4 sets of slots over here. And we've got no less than 6 over here. This will be the front of where you want to mount your seat. And the reason is pretty logical. If you look at it, we're typically going to take our seat and tilt it back. So we have a backwards rake, depending on the angle that you want. So this gives us the taller piece here with the 6 slots is going to give us more range, obviously, for that to tilt back. And then, of course, we'll use these slots over here to accommodate whatever angle that we're choosing in those. So you want this part towards the front. And if you ever get confused about what the front is, you can see down here, they've actually laser cut an arrow down in there. You see that? I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but there it is. And these, again, are 4.5 millimeter thick side plates for your seat brackets. Very heavy duty feeling unit, steel plate, nothing aluminum here. And yeah, it feels pretty substantial. But there's only one place that I can put these holes. And a good way to show you this, I'm going to take one of these bolts and put it in the hole where it's on my lineup holes here. I'll tell you what, let me flip this around and do it this way. Grab the other one. Show you a little better. So we got the same thing over here, but we're going to have it facing this way. And I can put one bolt. I'm looking straight down here so I can line it up pretty quick. The back row here on this plate, I'm going to put a bolt in it there. And I'm going to put another bolt. Found it. There it is. In the back row on the front part of it. So back row is how it fits. So that means I should be able to, if I needed to, slide the seat back a little bit, do the same thing. Do that over here, and I can. So I can put that one in the front row, that's in the front slot, and then this one in the back, in the front row in the back, and it's in that slot. So we do have some leeway, if you will, as far as moving this thing back and forth. Not much, but some. And then, of course, we're going to have some leeway as far as sliding. You can see I slide it back and forth here on top of that. It's a pretty good system, I think. I don't know if these holes are standard, and you can put any one you want on here as far as a side mount bracket, but I did try a Sparco, and it would not line up. So I would have to do something with the holes here if I wanted to run a Sparco bracket. So, but I'll tell you what, I'm not sure why you want to run another bracket, because this is a very thick steel bracket. It's thicker than my Sparco steel bracket. And yeah, it's very substantial. Plenty of adjustment in this thing. So yeah, I mean, just their seat side mount brackets are pretty nice. I like what they've done here. And of course, the finish is very good on all this stuff. I don't see any defects anywhere in that. So it's good looking stuff. Of course, now once we put a bolt in this thing in a seat and we tighten it down against this nice finish, it's going to leave a mark, which is always the shame with this stuff, isn't it? All right, so what we're going to do is take this over here. I'm going to get this mounted, right? Then I'm going to take, I'm going to go against the instructions here. The instructions say to mount this to the seat first, which you could do, but I'm going to play around with this a little bit when I'm mounting it, so I'm just going to mount them over there first, and then I'm going to come back and drop the seat down in it and put the bolts in the seat. Very simple. You know, we got these 20 millimeter long bolts that we're going to be putting in the side of the seat, and there's 2 on each side. Pretty simple stuff there as far as mounting the seat. When we come back, we'll see how all that went. So I have the seat slider assembly now mounted securely, and I want to show you guys something that I ran into, and it's another feature on here. And you know how I am here at the SRG. I want to show you guys as much information as I possibly can, so you can make at least sort of an educated guess on what you want to do when you buy something and spend your hard-earned money on something in sim racing. So anyway, when I torqued these bolts down here, I could see that these side plates here that the slider assembly is sitting on was not parallel with this, or it wasn't in the same plane. It was actually leaning over this way a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. And of course, it needs to be flat as we can get it, because everything needs to be square. So then, as soon as I saw that, I looked up and said, oh, this is something that we can use to straighten that out. So they're putting another 4.5 millimeter plate in here between these two, and we saw that if you saw the closer look on this. And I loosened these 4 bolts here. So there are slots in here, as you can see. So it allows this tray, or this plate, to slide back and forth. Or these guys to be able to go back this way or that way. So I was able to get it all squared up by loosening this plate up. And you can see there's still some room in here. So, of course, I'm totally speculating here when I say this, but I'm thinking maybe RSeat has some other cockpits that have different widths to them, and you can use the same seat slider assembly on them just by simply making the adjustment from the connecting plate across the top there. Pretty clever. I like that design there. It's the first time I've seen that. So it lets them get around some of the things if it doesn't work. Now, as far as how much you have here, I don't know. So I'm not sure if you could use this particular seat rail system on another cockpit. You'd have to check with RSeat on that. But I do like the way they did that. And now that I have everything nice and straight and lined up with our box down here, and this is lined up, I'm going to go ahead and center this as best I can. And then I'll just tighten these bolts back down. And the bolts are M8s, and they have nylocks on the bottom there. I don't know well you can see that, but hey, the nylock nut. And we have a washer on the top here too. And on these nylock nuts, they also have washers in between them. Okay, so I just want to show you guys that. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and get our seat side mount brackets mounted to this. All right, so I have my side mount seat brackets mounted to the slider assembly. And a couple of thoughts here. You can do it this way, or you can mount these brackets to your seat before you put it in, and then you'll be reaching under the seat to put the bolts in the holes that you want. I like doing it this way myself. It's just easier for me to set the seat in. Once I have these setting down here, I can see better what's going on. It's just the way I do things. So you can do it either way. It'll work. The one issue I ran into here, the bolt. The instructions call for these hex head bolts and a 20 millimeter. Unfortunately, these are not 20 millimeters. They're 15 millimeters. Now, the reason you want to use a hex head bolt like that, and I know a lot of manufacturers don't, they use the socket head caps like these, which is fine. It's just a clearance issue of getting a wrench in here while the seat's mounted and tighten these things down or loosen them or whatever the case may be. So with a flat head, as you can see, you have not only more area here exposed so you can get to it. In other words, it's not as high as a socket head cap is sitting, but you can get a wrench on it, and a wrench is flat, and you can slide a wrench straight in like this and get to it easier than trying to use a regular Allen wrench that has the L shape to it and put it in here. Even if you trim one down to real short, you can still have an issue of clearance of the back of the seat, depending on the angle you're running in your slots here. So anyway, this is too short to accommodate the washers and the nylock nut, as far as the nylock portion of the nut. What I mean by that is, if I push this in like this, all right, and we put this down here, I'm gonna have to do this one-handed here because I'm showing you guys. This is the nylock nut, and you can see there's the nylock piece of that nut. Out of it there, see that blue piece in there? That's what creates the friction that keeps it from backing out. So if I put this here, then I come over here with this mounting bolt, 15 millimeter, stick it through the hole. I think you can tell, once I get this down low enough, that that bolt is not going to be engaging much of the nylock in the nut. If you're not going to be engaging it, it really is no point in using a nylock nut to begin with. Not only that, but I can't use washers here either. So what do? Well, I went ahead and repurposed this guy here. And this is a 20 millimeter socket head cap, and that's what you see in the brackets now. Now, I don't know if I'm going to need these somewhere else. If I do, I've got some spare ones in my spare bins, parts for, bolts and things, so I'm not worried about it. But if you didn't have this, then you would be forced to use the 15 millimeter and the nylock with no washers, and you're still not engaging, to me anyway, a comfortable amount of the nylock part of that nut. So again, I like to show you guys every issue that I run into, good or bad. And yeah, it calls for a 20 mil. I'm not sure how these 15 mil bolts ended up in the kit, but there you go. There is a way to get around it though, and I wanted to show you that too. So all we have to do now that we have our brackets mounted, I still have them mounted a little loosely, and I have them spaced already to the back width of the seat, which is about 430 millimeters. So I have them spaced so I can accommodate that. And because we have slots in here, I can still move these a little bit, as you can see, to fine tune it as the seat goes in there. And when I sit the seat down, I'm going to put a towel or some kind of pad over these, just so that if I drop the seat too hard or something, it doesn't dent it or scratch the bottom of it. I try to keep things looking good as long as I can, but sometimes it's a struggle. So what we'll do next is, let's just take a look at that seat. Now let's take a closer look at the seat that came with my Cockpit. This is the in-house or the RSeat brand seat, and it's a $150 ad when you're ordering your Cockpit. If you don't order a seat, it's minus $349. So if you have your own seat, or you have a seat that you want other than what they also offer some Sparcos, then you can just not get the seat and put your own on there and save a little money. Now, this is finished in an Alcantara fabric, and I'll show you what that feels like. It's also available in what they call an eco leather, and also a fabric. I haven't seen either one, so I don't know what that is about, but this definitely feels good. I'm trying to give you a shot of the textures on this. The construction seems to be very good. There's a Velcro closure here for the foam. The density of the foam, it feels acceptable from all the seats that I've tried. It seems about right, but you won't know for sure until obviously you get in the seat. It has a nice contour for your thighs, so it's not a flat piece sitting in here that can be very uncomfortable. Some of these seats that I've seen, especially the new Sparcos, they've gone to a flat front piece here instead of having that rolled off thigh support, which is actually not as comfortable as the old one was. I don't know why they do that. Companies do that, but there you go. So the foam feels good in here. We got some nice padding all through here, and of course in the thigh bolsters and the shoulder. Got your rib cage here and your shoulders up here. We'll take a look real quick. We'll open this up, and we have some white foam that you see a lot in upholstery work. It's got a little concave or a little curve rounded edge here that follows the curve of everything else, and it's flat on the bottom. Again, seems to be pretty good, dense quality foam, but then again, that's subjective. One person might think that's not soft enough or it's not hard enough. While I have this off, I'm going to stick it back here. The seat has harness hoops, if you will, or access ports, what do you want to call them, and they're nice and tight. They're pressing into the foam that's in the seat cover here, also up here. So these are all not nice and tight. There's one in the bottom here. You can see it there. But this one, unfortunately, is rattling around a little bit. Even though it's fabric, it doesn't really make a lot of noise, but it's loose. And the reason it's loose is because there's no foam down here in this part. This is just fabric covering the fiberglass shell itself. So there's spacers in here, obviously manufactured into this piece, and they're just using the same piece they use everywhere else. Really not a showstopper or anything, but I like to point everything out that I can. It is a replaceable cover. We have the usual spring cable, steel cable spring set up here for the cover. You can see the spring right there. So if you ever need to peel this back and replace it, you can. All right, let's turn it back up. This is a fiberglass shell. There is some flex in the thigh bolsters over here. I can actually grab them like this and kind of squeeze it, and I can feel it. That's creaking, is not that bending. It's just fiberglass. It doesn't creak like that. It's the fabric rubbing up against it. But there is some flex in here that I wouldn't have in my Sparco seat. But again, this is not a racing seat. And up here we have some in the shoulder bolsters. Maybe a little bit more of it there. So not the thickest fiberglass shell in the world. But again, at the price point that they're adding on for this seat, you do have to manage your expectations, I think. But again, if you have your own seat, then it's something you wouldn't even be considering anyway. The fiberglass shell itself has a very good finish on it. I can't find any blemishes, any defects anywhere. And that goes with the stitching too on the cover. Everything looks very good and it feels good. I don't know if you can see it or not in this shot, but you might be able to see the grain of the sheet fiberglass as they lay up the fiberglass against the resin when they get it in the mold. And you can actually see the fiberglass in here. Now, not all the time, but sometimes that just it's a good indicator of the thickness of the shell itself. So a thicker shell, you probably wouldn't see the fiberglass because it has more resin in the back part of it, or different layup way that they do the layup. But again, not the stiffest shell in the world, but again, I wouldn't expect it to be that at this price point. So really, complaints about this seat, except for the loose hoop. That it'd be nice if they could cut the spacers out of this and just make it tight so it didn't do that. But it is what it is, I guess. So other than that, everything is pretty good on the seat. I can't really complain too much about it, and it does have some flex. But remember, we're in a simulator. We're in a cockpit. We're not in a racing car. So do you really need this to be super stiff? I would say no. Is it nice to have it super stiff? Yeah. Especially when you get into like a 60 OF or 40 OF, whatever, you start to get into motion, then you're going to want something that's a little bit stiffer. So when you're sliding around in it, there's no flex in the seat, and you're maximizing the tactile potential that your motion system has to offer. In a flexi seat, you don't feel as good as something that's very stiff, like my racing seat I use on mine and my Sparco. So yeah, there's the seat. You can get one, or you can just delete it and save some money and get your own if you want. But overall, I think it's going to be an okay seat. It has a pretty good shape to it. It's not too straight in the back, because some seats I've seen come from manufacturers with their cockpits. There was almost like a 90-degree bend in the thing, and I was going, what in the world are they thinking? And I'm not sure where we're going to have it for the rake, but I'm usually around 30 to 35 degrees, and we'll figure that out once we get it over there and mount it to our seat mount brackets, and we will do that next. Here is the seat securely mounted to the brackets, and the brackets securely mounted to the base. Now, this is about a 35-degree rake, and that's usually where I'm at, 30, 35 degrees, depending what's available. To get that, I was able to use the bottom slot here on the back part of the side mount seat bracket, and the 4 slot up on this side. Just kind of worked out that way, 4 and 4. We'll go around the back here, and I'll show you the clearance I ended up with the socket head cap bolts. Now, if you've been following along, the kit comes with these hex head bolts for this that are supposed to be 20 millimeters long. They weren't 20 millimeters long, they were 15, so they weren't going to fit and engage enough of that nylock nut on the bottom there. So I used, that were in the kit, some socket head caps that were 20 millimeters, and I used a washer on top, and I used a washer on bottom where that nut is. Now, it still was close fit here, even though I can't get any lower here. We just made it. A regular hex wrench would not have fit in there. It'd be too high. I'm using this. This is a specialty hex head. It has a ball head on it, which helps you get into tight places like this, and it just made it. So that's why a lot of times people want to use a hex head in here, because a wrench will just slide right in there and you don't have any problems with clearance. So this, I'm going to show you here. I was able to kind of wiggle it around in there and get it to sit there. And then, of course, it's just a matter of getting a wrench on the bottom of our nut and tightening everything up. So that's how that went. So everything went pretty smoothly, actually smoother than I expected it to. Now we'll go ahead and go over to the side here, and I'll show you the bolts on this side of the seat. Again, all the way at the bottom, and I'm on the fourth one over here. I sat in the seat already. It feels pretty good. It's brand new foam, so it is going to feel stiffer than it will in, say, a week or two of using it. Depending on how many hours you put on it. When your body starts compressing the foam, it's going to feel a little bit differently in a couple of weeks. So just keep that in mind when you first sit in a seat. A lot of times you'll sit in something, this is great, and then a month later on the road, boy, this thing is hard. All right, so anyway, we've got our seat mounted now, so we'll get on to the next segment. So this is the monitor mount that they sent with my kit. Now this is a single monitor mount. It will handle up to 100 by 100 VESA, the 100, 200, 200, 300 because of the rectangle pattern on those. Now I've got this loose so you can hear it jingling around a little bit. And this is a very substantial, just like everything from RSeat that I've gotten out of the boxes, this is 15.4 pounds or about 7 kilograms in weight. It'll handle 24 up to 43-inch monitors, and that includes the ultra wide, like the new ones come in from Samsung, the G9, things like that, the curved monitors. So it'll handle just about anything. Now the main mounting points are going to be on the roll bar part of the chassis. When we go about over there, and we'll see that that's where the wheelbase mount is also. I call that the accessory mount because we're going to have this mounted to it. We got a keyboard mount. We have an accessory screen mount that we can put on there. So anyway, these bolts here, we're going to fasten it to the bottom of the main bracket that's also holding the wheelbase bracket, which you have to remove to install this because we have to get access to the holes underneath the wheelbase bracket, and you'll see that once I get over there. Now, this is very well constructed, just like everything else. It's got a lot of welding on it. You can see all these little rectangular pieces that are cut out here. They have 2 beads of weld on them everywhere you look. I think I counted them out to be 16 different beads of welds. We even have a weld down here. This is a penetrating weld that goes through the main plate here and helps connect this piece to the rest of it, even though we're still connecting this piece over here all the way along, but we've got an extra piece down there for the joint where the bend is, and that's a reinforcing weld down here because what we're going to be doing is putting a lot of weight right here. When we have this mounted like this, and we got our monitor sticking up here, and it's got an angle on it like this, it's going to, again, the stress is going to be right in this area here of this bracket. Now there is a square piece that they've bent. And just like we've seen before, if you've been following along, first off, we've got some of that RSeat laser cut stuff going on here. All this is laser cut. We've got the slots cut into the bends, you can see there, and that facilitates easy bending, so nothing crinkles or gets messed up. And of course, they use, we've seen already in here, is this little system here where they have a tab and groove system when they cut for their bends on the laser cutter. You can see it right there. See that tab left in there, and then we have a groove that accepts that tab. When they bend this and they put it in the welding jig and they bend it so everything stays lined up. It helps line things up. Right. Now, let's talk about this part of it. This is where the monitor is going to go in this area here. And we have this bracket here. And the bracket can be moved into any one of these slots here, depending on the height you want. Now, there's not going to be any adjustment that I can tell here from as far as bring it to you or push away from you. It's going to be one distance from you once you get this mount all assembled. And we'll see that again once we have it ready to go. Now, this is a cool little system they have here. I looked it over a little bit and figured out what was going on. Of course, the instruction manual tells you too, but it is a busy piece because of the different ways you can mount. The first piece here is we're going to take this off. It has a little tab in here that fits into this piece right here. So these are 2 separate pieces. And even this piece is 2 separate pieces. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unscrew this piece first, and we're going to see how that comes out. And to do that, we've got M8 bolts. And again, we have the M8 threaded inserts in all of this. So I'm going to go ahead and flip this around like so you guys can see what's going on. And I've already got them loose, so it wouldn't take me forever to get them out. So I'm going to go ahead and pull these out, and we'll see what that plate looks like. And these are 20 millimeter M8s, it looks to be. Go ahead and pull the rest of these out. And we'll get the two on this side. Oops, right here. And one over here. Wants to fall over on this side, so I'm going to kind of hold it there. All right, so let me go ahead and pull this part off. See, it just lifts off, or likewise, you could just pull this off. But in the front piece here, you see that slot? This is where this tab is going to hang. So once you have your monitor attached to this piece, you're just going to bring it over to this already mounted, and you're simply just going to hang it in the groove, and that'll hold it there for you, like that. So I'm going to get all this in the picture here. So it'll hold your monitor there while you're securing the bolts. It's kind of neat the way they've done that, so it takes the pressure off of you trying to hold the monitor. Again, just clip it in there like that, and you're ready to go. Then you can secure your monitor. Right. Easy enough. And this piece here, obviously these 4 bolts in it, and the slots allow us to move it back and forth, and just take the bolts out and move it wherever position we need it to be in. I don't know where I'm going to have my monitor yet, so I'm just going to leave it there for now. I can always adjust it once I have the, you really don't know yet until you get everything kind of around you, like the steering wheel and things like that. You might not know exactly what height you want this at. So that's kind of a trial and error thing. But this comes off, and I'm just going to leave that on for this review, or this part of the review in the segment, because yeah, you really don't need, it's pretty simple what's going on here. What we really want to look at is what's going on for the monitor. And depending on the monitor that you have, you may not need this flat plate, or might not be able to use the flat plate. You see there's some screws in there. See the silver bits there? All 4 of those? Those are some hex head screws right there in a 100 millimeter VESA pattern. And you see we've got some access holes right here, and down here, and here. So we can get to these guys and take this apart. So if you have a flat back monitor, or your mounting plate is flat, then you could just leave it like this and mount it. However, if you don't, and you've got a recessed pocket in the back of your monitor, like mine have, most of mine are Asus, and it seems all of them are really do that. I'm going to get my M3 wrench here, and we're going to go ahead and pull these screws out, because I'm going to need to do that. I'm not going to use the flat part of this bracket, and I'm going to take this apart so you can see what I'm talking about here. Get 2 more out, and 1 more. And these are M3s, so any VESA mount M3s will work on this. The ones that I have on my monitor now, I have another monitor hanging somewhere I'm going to use, and those should be long enough to get in here. But you might want to keep these from getting lost somewhere, like here. All right, so there's the flat plate. Again, this is the 100 millimeter VESA square piece there. We have 200 millimeters between these two, so you can put a 200 millimeter VESA mount on here if you have that kind of a monitor. And this is the recessed pocket bit here. See how that's raised up? All right, so this, if your monitor is big enough and the recessed pocket area is big enough, which I think mine is, this will go in and fit flat up against the monitor, but this part will still be hanging out, right? So we got plenty of access to the piece here that we're going to be able to put over here. So that's how I'm going to be mounting mine. Pretty simple stuff, really, how we're going to mount this. And I'm going to go ahead and put this piece on, and then we'll come back and look at how that looks. And then we'll come back and put the monitor on, and I'll show you me just hanging the monitor on there. Very simple thing once you see how it's done. And again, the instructions that come with your Cockpit are very good at describing how this works. So here's the monitor mounted to our monitor arm support. And of course, we have our bracketry attached to the back of our monitor. The support attached to the front bracket here, or the roll bar, I'm going to show you some B-roll of that in a minute here. And you can see the 4 bolts in there. Those are the M8 bolts. And it's just a matter of getting it lined up properly and then getting your bolts started. Once everything's started, just go ahead and run them down. And then once I was happy with what it was doing as far as sitting against that plate on the bottom, I went ahead and did a final torque on them. Now, the monitor itself on the brackets, you can see I took that other piece of bracket off, that 200 millimeter, the VESA 200 millimeter pattern. And this is the 100 by 100 pattern that I put on here. And you can see it's sitting flush with the back of the monitor because there is a recessed piece on the monitor itself that went into very nicely, as I discussed previously in the monitor mount segment. Then once that was attached to the monitor, of course, it's a very simple matter to get this piece. I have it all the way up, as you can see, pretty high. And I'm not sure if that's where the final position is going to be, but I'm probably going to lower it a little bit, I think. But yeah, I went ahead and attached this piece because all you have to do with the monitor, once you have that bracket attached, is come back and you can see another B-roll here of me letting that thing drop into the slot there, and then there you go. It's not finished yet as far as putting any bolts in. It's just this thing supports it so well up here. I'm really not worried about the bolts not being out there in a moment. And I might have to move it around a little bit, but it feels very sturdy. Even up this high, I can wiggle it a bit with my hand. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I've got a lot of leverage on it going all the way down here where it's connected. As far as just holding a monitor, yeah, no worries. Your monitor shouldn't be shaking unless you have motion on this thing, and then I probably wouldn't have my monitor on it anyway. But yeah, 45-inch monitor, I won't see any problem putting like a 40-pounder on here, no sweat. This thing is definitely going to handle it. So yeah, we'll get on to the next segment. Now we'll take a look at the wheelbase mount that comes on the P1. First off, this is again, very thick steel plate, the same it's been going on, the same theme we've been seeing everywhere on here. We've got some welds in here holding the plate on. You can see the top plate's being welded there. And of course on the other side too. We have two movable plates here on the bottom, and they will slide back and forth in their tracks, like so. They are also pivotable, so we can change the height of our wheelbase using different holes over there on the, you see the green roll bar in the back picture back there. That roll bar is a very stout piece, by the way, so I'm not really concerned about putting a lot of weight on that. So this looks pretty good. It has the M8 inserts in it. The front of the plate will accommodate the usual suspects for spacing. That is the Thrustmaster, Fanatec, Logitech, all those guys. Obviously, they're going to fit on here. My Midge motor mount that I have is going to will fit on here too, on the outer perimeter here. These are M6 holes, by the way. We have some M8 size ones, but most of them are M6. Yeah, very stout little piece here. We're going to be using this piece. At least I think I'm going to be using this piece. This is their front mount setup. Now the front mount setup is for the Simucubes, for the Midges, any servo motors that are standard most people are using should fit in here. I haven't tried a Cole Morgan yet on it, but they should fit. But again, this is a very stout piece that has been built here. You can see we've got the laser cut out for RSeat. Interior with the front plate is welded to this piece here. And you'll see inside of here, if the light's on it, that we have some 90-degree L welds on each corner, top and bottom, and then we've got a weld in the middle of those all the way around. Again, it's the theme with everything that I've seen so far from this kit. These guys really are building some really solid, robust equipment here. And you can see the weld there on either side, spanning the length of this plate, so it mounts to this plate. Very heavy piece. This piece combined with this piece, when you stack it on top of each other, is almost 13 pounds, which is, I think, around almost 6 kilos. So that's a lot of weight. Then when you take something like this Midge motor over here, which is 22 pounds, and stick that on top of it, we're going to have a lot of weight on that flange over there on that roll bar. But again, I don't think it's going to have any trouble supporting it, but we'll see once we get it all loaded up. Now, one thing about this mount here, I'm going to show you this. It will fit the Simucubes no problem as far as any clearance with this side piece here. This is pretty prominent here. A lot of area right here, right? Which I'm going to show you an example, another mount I have here. It doesn't have that much area on it. That's an old stainless steel one I have for a Midge motor, but it's just not as much area as this one, as you can see. Now, which is fine, makes it nice and solid, but there is a consideration here if you're going to be running a Midge type motor on this particular mount. I'm going to stand this up and show you. We've got our connectors here. This is a power connector, data connector, and they use these 90-degree plugs, big metal ones. I'll show you what those look like in a second once I just discuss this pretty quickly here. First off, I typically want to mount my plugs to the side, either side of my cockpit when it's mounted to the wheelbase. This way there's nothing sticking up from the top and interfering with my monitor height. So I get my monitor as low as I can. If you have these on here, it really obviously sticks up a lot. So I want to show you what's going on here. If I put this on straight, like this, or the way straight for them at RSeat, you can see I've got plenty of clearance here, right? But the motor itself, now I've got the plugs on the top, because that's here's the flanges. There's only one way to mount this. The flanges will be flat. So now I've got these on top, and this power connector is going to be sticking up pretty far. How far? Well, let's take a look here. Let me just show you a little bit. I have the cable over here. I'll just show you real quick what it looks like when it's attached, because I want to show you all considerations on this. All right, so once I have this on here, and we won't go all the way, well, I might as well put it all the way down so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. So there it is, tight. So you can see how much, let me get my black shirt out of the way, how much that's going to stick up, right? So that means my monitor can't get any lower than this thing, because my monitor, the way the monitor stand works. Now, if I had a rolling monitor stand, I could probably bring it in and then drop it down behind it, or sliding one that you slide on the carpet or something. Then a freestanding, in other words, then you could probably do it. But with the monitor mount I'm going to use that they sent me with the Cockpit, this is going to interfere with the monitor. Now, there's something I can do here to make this work. Let me go ahead and pull this back off so it gets out of the way and I don't mess any of my cables up trying this stuff. And they could very easily redesign this a little bit in their production, because it's all in-house, which is another beautiful thing about doing everything in-house. And you can make a very slight mod to this to make it work. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to flip this back over, and then we'll turn it this way. Now, if I wanted to do a side mount so that my cables are coming out the side, this would go on like this, right? But it would go down, and then you can see I've got interference down here with this part of the bracket. So it's going to hit the housing for the power plug. Now, I've already measured what that is by coming up to the top plate here, measuring between the flange and where the top of this top plate is, and that is about 20 millimeters. Really, it's almost 18, but I'm going to say 20 just to give me plenty of room. So all you would have to do in the manufacturing process is cut one of these ribs enough to give you 20 millimeters of drop. Then you're clear. And I might even do that. I was thinking about getting my angle grinder out and just cutting here, and then come back over on the other side and cutting the other side of it so that I get that 20 millimeters of drop in this without this hitting it. And this is steel, so it's easy enough to paint it black again where we actually did the cutting, dress it up with some files or something and paint it. So it wouldn't be hard to do. And of course, in the manufacturing process, they could actually change a little bit of the design, and I'm going to recommend that to RSeat for people who do have midges. They could just change the design in general, right? We could just come straight down off of this edge and come straight down and maybe just some kind of a radius or something this way and just have 2 slots in it. And then it would radius around, then we'd have plenty of room to get this on a midge motor and have a sideways mount. Or they could make a dedicated one. I don't think it would really affect anything as far as structural integrity on this mount. This thing is just a beast. So cutting a little notch out like that is really not going to affect the sturdiness. I couldn't possibly imagine it would. And they even put the flange plate on the bottom is actually a separate plate from the plate on the top of it. See where the seam is here? Where they've taken this side plate and it's all wrapped it all the way around, and they've used those, see the notch, and I'll call it a tongue and groove, I guess you could actually call it that, system they use for lining up their plates before they're welded. So anyway, I'm still debating if I want to cut this because it's so pretty, but you know what? I might do it anyway because I want to use the midge, my VRS. I don't have a semi-cube, so it's either this or I'm going to have to figure out something else to mount on here. But we'll see that once we get there. Again, I'm not crazy about cutting something, but if this was my cockpit, I would certainly be doing it. I wouldn't hesitate, just do it right away. But again, easy enough for them to change that, I think, in the design process. So there it is. Now, one thing is, I could put this on here. cut this, run this piece. And I'm going to show you the differences, by the way, how the clearance is. So this comes in here like this. You go down. Nice and flat. There we go. And you can see that this was cut, so it would have the clearance for that. So you can mount sideways. So then I'd have it sitting here, right here like this. I could mount this to this plate. It'll actually fit this plate. So a regular midge bracket will fit the outer holes here of this plate here. So I could do that too, but to be quite honest, this is such a stiff mount. I want to test it. I think I'm going to go ahead and first I'm going to see how high the plug is. Maybe I can get away with it. This is just testing anyway, but I still want to cut this for some reason to make it work. I don't know. It's just me, I guess. So we'll figure out what we're going to do when we come back, but you can see all this stuff is very stout. It's something that I think is going to be pretty stiff when we're using it, but again, we'll have to drive it to find out. So here is the wheel deck mounted to the front roll bar support. I have to say, I was concerned at first about the range of motion that you will get out of something like this, but after I put it on here and checked it out, you can see, watch this, when I pick this thing up, you can go all the way up to here. Now when you do that, obviously you're changing the position as far as relative to your hands of the deck itself, but even then you have adjustments within the slots, which can go back to the front if you want. As high as, let's see, how far, and I can get it flat right there as high as I can get it. That's as flat as I can get it, because if this comes down, it drags it down even more. So if I want it flat, that's probably going to be the height right about here, the max. Well, no. We can still go up this way, can't we? There's a limit, though, how high I can go before it changes the angle on me. But as you can see, there's a lot of difference as far as how far up you can come with this and how far it's going to be presented to you in your seat. So everything went smooth mounting this. These are very large M10 bolts. They have 8mm hexes on them. And you can see I do have them positioned in the highest hole in the back and also in the front over here. So that gives you the maximum range. And that's what I'm looking for, is because I already sat in the seat, and with the low like this, it's just not going to do it for me. So there it is. We have it mounted. I still don't know exactly where I'm going to have it, but I'm going to get it pretty much where I think it should be before I put the wheel deck on here, or rather the wheel base on here, because there's going to be a lot of weight and I want this to be tight when that happens. And yeah, so we want to make sure it's basically where we want it to. In fact, let me see if I can tighten this up while I have it up in a general position. See how that holds. Okay. So I would still want to do a little adjusting here, but you can see once you have that way, you can still do this. So again, it depends on your wheelbase and how you want it presented to you while you're sitting in the seat over here. Here is our midge motor from our VRS force feedback wheel kit, securely mounted in the RSeat mount. And I was able to, if you'll notice, if you've been following along, the power and data cable connections are not on top. Remember, we had interference on the side here from that if we twisted it on the side, but I made that mod that I was talking about in the other segment, and I'll show you that in a second. First off, once I tightened all this down, we've got our M6 socket head caps in here. We've got some nylock nuts underneath. So this is feeling very secure. The mount itself is now all tightened down. Remember, these are M10 bolts here, and they're 8mm hex wrench size socket head caps. So yeah, you can really crank down on those things, and I have this cranked down pretty good, and it is just solid. I can't perceive any flex at all when I'm pushing on the wheel back here, or the motor rather. Confidence is high. This is going to be a nice stiff mount. This is the stiffest mount I've ever tested here at the SRG in this type of cockpit, what I call a prefabricated type of cockpit. They really did their homework, and they've done a good job with this. I'm always harping on this stuff, as you guys know, when I do cockpit reviews, as far as how stiff the wheel mount is and how important that is to get as much feedback that you can out of the motor. I mean, if you have a flexi mount, you're robbing yourself of the money you paid to get a motor that can deliver those fine little details of force feedback that help you drive better. So again, you'll notice the plugs are on the side I was able to put that on the side because I made that mod I was talking about, because I really wanted to use this because it's very heavy duty piece up here, as you guys know if you saw the previous segments. And I went ahead and just cut the notch out. You can see it there. Just got an angle grinder with a cutting wheel and cut it there. You can see I measured it pretty good. It's just short of the casement there. And if you go down under here, now this is going to show up. But yeah, the shadows are killing it. But yeah, I notched it out there. So all I really did was take out this piece here, one of these steel pieces. And as I was saying before, they could actually make this a little differently and never have this problem by coming down maybe off of this line and maybe coming straight down or something and then looping underneath or something like that. And that would be cured. So now I can mount the cables to the side. I will have a nice flat top on my motor. So that's going to let me have my monitor on this monitor mount nice and low, just where I want it. So I can see everything starting right with level with this motor. That's the idea anyway. Have the bottom of the monitor down there. So when I'm turning, my hands are actually blocking some of the monitor. Again, if we had these sitting on top with the 90-degree metal elbow connectors, yeah, it would be sitting about this high. And that would be blocking a lot of the monitor. Or I would have to mount the monitor higher so it wouldn't block the view. And we'll go ahead and once we get the monitor on, we'll see how all that shapes up. But right now, I'm pretty happy with the result. Now let's take a closer look at the shifter mount assembly and some extras that come with that. First off, we have the main support. And this is going to fit like this on the side of your cockpit base. Now, depending on the side you want it to be on, obviously, that's the side we'll mount it to. The base over there that you see in the background has both sides of it on those box rails, has the inserts for this. Now, here's the fixture on the top, and that's going to receive everything else. It kind of builds up like a stack. Also, as we continue on through this, we can see that there's, again, a big weld here. We've got welding everywhere. These flanges on here on the sides, these things are welded all the way around on the flange there. You can see on either side and that side and here. Again, very heavy duty. It just continues on with everything I pick up to put through this review process. I mean, it welds all the way around here. Very, very sturdy piece of kit here. This is 4mm thick steel plate, by the way. Has a lot of heft to it, if you will. I'm guessing this is probably around 8 pounds or so. And again, we can see the relief cuts they use when they bend this square piping here. So everything will fit in this. Now, the main assembly that goes on this is going to be this piece over here. Let's get that over here, like so. And you see the top of this has mounts for all these other things you see sitting around here. We'll get to in a second. So, and of course, because of the holes are in here, you could probably mount, well, whatever you want as long as these holes fit, and even drill your own holes if you need to. This sits inside of this channel here, but it doesn't just sit using this bracket here. There are these two brackets inside of here. See these guys? And I've got one of these loose. Which one is it? This one. And I'm going to loosen this up and show you how this works. And I guess you can go either way with it. Doesn't matter which two you take out. We're going to take that side out. So this will flip up. And then it will fit inside of... This stuff is not light. It'll fit inside of here like that. And that's what gives us the change as far as the reach. So this allows this swiveling plate and the other plate here, once it's attached to this bracket, will allow the top of this to swivel back and forth, which will go up and down. So you have some height adjustment on it. And you also have some length adjustment on this too. So you can slide it back and forth. And you can pick out which slots that you have the bolts in. So there is some wiggle room around here as far as how you're going to use this. So that'll be the main assembly. This will be sitting on top of this bracket once we have it mounted. Now, I'm going to show you this here. This is the Thrustmaster Logitech shifter mount plate. That's what they're calling this. And of course, this will fit. Flip this back over. Don't make it too much noise. And this will fit over here. like this, I believe. And we also have a Fanatec shifter plate, and that's this one over here. That's what they're calling this anyway, but it's got a lot of holes in it. So imagine, again, you can mount whatever you want to this stuff. And it fits this, let's see, we'll check my centers here. Yeah, it fits that way on there. Then we have what they call the Thrustmaster TSS handbrake setup, the sequential shifter setup. That's what they call this plate. And it will mount right here like this. So we'll take out this corner M8, that corner M8, of course, these two up here. Let this fall on there and then bolt it back down. So you could literally have this sitting up here. That's the way the picture shows it. And then this guy sitting over here to take away, add wherever you want to get your peripherals or your controls mounted the way you want them to. All this stuff is very heavy duty. This is this is a 4mm thick plate too on this one. We have 3mm thick, or a little over 3 mil, on both of these here, the Thrustmaster Logitech and the Fanatec mount. And of course, all this is 4mm. Very heavy, substantial kit here. Again, with keeping in the theme here of everything that I've pulled out of the box for this RSeat cockpit to date. So what we're going to do is go ahead and I'm going to get this mounted and get this mounted over here and stack some stuff on there. And when we come back, we'll come over there and take a look at it. And meanwhile, I'll be figuring out what I'm going to be using for shifter duties to try this thing out when I'm actually driving it. Here is the shifter mount securely fastened to the box rails of the main chassis down there with no less than 6 M8 bolts. And of course, as you might imagine, once you cinch those down with that kind of surface area mating to it, it feels very secure. I have the top piece, the adjustable piece, mounted to that. I'm going to show you a little B-roll here real quick, just showing you me moving around a little bit. Now, it doesn't show all the range of motion because you can move these bolts around into different slots and obviously make it go different places as far as reach and height. But there are limits to it, obviously. So, yeah, and that's one of the things about these kind of prefab cockpits. They're not as adjustable as, say, like an aluminum profile cockpit. But I can say this about it. Once we have these M10 bolts secured on both sides, and I attached this with some M8 bolts, this Thrustmaster HSS. I'm not sure where I'm going to be yet, so I'm just going to leave it in this state for now. I don't have the Thrustmaster Logitech piece or the Fanatec piece on here. But I can tell you this, when I grab this thing and try to move it, it's just rock solid. This thing is as stiff as you can get. It's like I said, RSeat set out to build a cockpit, what I call a production cockpit or a prefab cockpit, that's going to be very stiff. And this, so far, each element that I've added to this cockpit, at least at this stage, has been very solid. Yeah, no movement in it at all. Confidence is getting higher and higher all the time, that once I get in this and start using it and driving it, that it's going to feel the same way and nothing's going to be flexing in it. But we're just going to have to wait and see, won't we? All right. So now we got the shifter mount done. It's time to move on to the next part. Now we're going to install the keyboard accessory item. And this is pretty simple to install. You have this main connector piece here. And this is going to connect in two places. This is going to connect, the deepest part here is going to be connecting on our roll bar. And we have this long 45mm long M8 bolt with a washer that's going to come up from underneath and then go into a threaded insert that's already in the roll bar itself. Then, once we have that secured, we'll come back in and put the bolt in that's going to attach this arm. And that's an M10 bolt. And you have an M10 bolt in your kit with a washer, and you'll just come through the top and fasten that. It's pretty simple. And this is going to be adjustable, as you might imagine. If I can get it to slink out here. And you can swing it all around as far as the keyboard being on the other end. This is the end that we'll be fastening, just shot there, onto this piece here. So the M10 bolt goes in here, and this piece is going to sit down on top of it like this. Well, like this, actually. So pretty simple. We just put two bolts in, and we should be good to go, except for attaching the keyboard itself. And we'll do that. We'll take a look at that right now. Again, you can see all the welds on all this stuff. Very sturdy equipment. See the beads running both down the sides of this on both sides and on the end down there. These are 2-inch diameter tubes. Again, very hefty, heavy stuff. Yeah, I don't have any fears of this flexing or causing any problems as far as being loose. Again, it's almost overdone. And now this is the keyboard tray itself. This thing is huge. It's like 28.5 inches wide, or long rather. And that comes out like 270 some millimeters, I believe. So yeah, very substantial keyboard tray here. It comes out of the kit with the M8 bolts already installed into our threaded inserts. And we'll be installing that once we have our arm installed to this piece of the bracket on the other end. So that's where our keyboard will be sitting. And you can see we've got 2 holes in there. One is a straight hole, one is a slot. And that's, of course, so we can adjust the keyboard's angle once we have it attached. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and get all this set up, bolt it down, and we come back, we'll take a look at it and look at any adjustments that are available. So here's the final result of our keyboard assembly installation. As you can see, I have a full-size keyboard on here and a full-size trackball. And there's still plenty of room on this keyboard tray. You can put a little cup holder up there or something with a beer and maybe some pretzels. You can see these huge linkages here that connect these 2-inch bars together. These are M10 units, and they are nylock nuts on the bottom. And you need to adjust the tension on that so that it moves the way you want it to. Out of the box, it's pretty stiff for shipping, so you're going to probably have to loosen those to get it to move like as smoothly as you see it moving now. And again, we have the top part here attached with that big M10 bolt into the bracket that we installed. And the bracket was installed with that M8 bolt that we saw before into the roll bar itself. Now with this kind of configuration, this is the height of your keyboard. There's no way to adjust it up or down, at least back here, but we can adjust the rake or the angle of it, and you can see the slot down there. And I have it kind of leaning back a little bit right now. And again, that's totally subjective to the way you would want it. And it moves in and out pretty smoothly, you might imagine. I really don't have any gripes about this keyboard tray, except that it's big. Maybe that'd be a gripe. Maybe there's something a little bit more leaner and not as big as this. But, you know, it's definitely heavy duty. It'll hold whatever you can throw on there. You know, you can put a 20-pound keyboard on there if you know where to find one. And maybe some other peripherals. But there it is, and it works fine. It does what it's supposed to do. And yeah, we'll just go ahead and get on to the next segment. Now let's take a look at the tablet button box assembly that is also an accessory and what we can use this for. The pieces here will actually slide back and forth. They have these rubber bits on them so that whatever you put in here, a tablet or whatever that you're mounting in here, a button box or something, will fit in there. So we have 2 on each side. You don't have to use both of them, but there they are. That's how it comes. I think you can actually take one of these off if you wanted to. You only wanted to use one. You could just take one side of these brackets off. You can see these M8 bolts here attaching it to the side there. This also has an angle adjustment on it, so we can twist it back and forth. You might look at that once I get it mounted. It might show a little better there, but you can see how these things slide back and forth. Once in position, you will use these handles on the back to secure it in that position. We have very similar to the keyboard. This is just a 2-piece though on this 2-inch steel plate tube assembly. And we have this bracket here that we'll be mounting everything to that we saw on the keyboard, if you saw that part. This piece here, let me show you how this is working. The deepest part is going to fit on the roll bar that you see in the background, that green thing. And this M8 bolt will come up underneath and attach it that way. Then we'll have this hole sitting here that we're going to be putting the M10 bolt into, and that's over here, again, included with your kit. And this will come straight down into this piece. That's the piece that will go in there. You can see it's kind of a half circle there. Everything welded, a little plate welded on there. And that's just going to sit in here like this once we have it attached. In this case, it'll be turned around because I'm going to be putting, this will be on the right-hand side. I already have the keyboard on the left. So in this case, it will be turned around like that. And it'll be going that way towards the right of the cockpit. Now this piece here is how we're going to mount this whole bracket to it, this center bracket. You see the hole there? That's just going to come in and sit on top of this like so. Or maybe like so. like that. Of course, the bolt will be cinching it down. And then we can have something where we can pivot it back and forth. And we can obviously adjust the height here. And we're going to be able to adjust the angle also back and forth. So, pretty simple, straightforward assembly here. And again, I had them loose so I could show you how this bracket is moving around here. And what I'll do now is go ahead and attach my bracket, get the arm attached, go ahead and attach the whole assembly to it. When we come back, we'll take a look at that and see how that went. So here is the tablet slash button box mount, securely fastened to our chassis. And you can see I have a tablet in there for an example. This tablet's about 9 3/4 inch wide, or about 250 millimeters, and 160 millimeters tall, which is around 6 inches. We still have some room left, as you can see on the slots there, to raise the top part. So we could get something, maybe another 30 millimeter tall in there without any issues, I think. And here's the empty one. I was going to put my button box in this. But the button box I have, you can see over here on this chassis, is a kind of a tall one. That's the way it's set up. And laying it flat probably would have worked if you really need it to, but I just thought I'd leave it alone. Plus, if you don't want to have an extra one on there, remember, these two M8 bolts, so we can pull this bracket off, and so it's not hanging out there in the air if you're not going to be using it. Now, they have a groove system here. You can see the rubbers there. You can see the groove better in the empty one. That will hold your tablet, top and bottom, so it won't go anywhere. And if you had a button box to put in there, it's about 40 millimeters wide, so it should be plenty of room to grab a button box and secure it properly, as long as it will fit in there. Now, on the back here, we also have the angle adjustment. I haven't done that yet because it looked pretty good to me when I was sitting in there straight up and down. Of course, that's subjective, depending on what you have. We also have a pretty cool little clamping system back here. It's based on a cam. See this cam here? The shape of this is part of this bracket. If I lift this up, and I'm going to show you some B-roll here, me actually reaching over, grabbing the handle, pulling it up, and then you can adjust to the height that you're going to need. Then you just push it back down, and it locks in because of that cam action. So you don't have to loosen these M8 bolts to adjust each one of those. Nice little slick design there. It works pretty well. And yeah, so overall, happy with the way this actually went. And it's not too much room as far as taking up too much room. It seems to be just about right as far as where you would want it. You can pivot it here. We can pivot it over here on this little turnbuckle type system. And I could also fold it back and make it shorter if I wanted to and bring it back further away. But typically, I think on something like this, you're going to want it closer, as long as it doesn't interfere with the shifter and handbrake that I have set up on here. So yeah, everything went pretty smooth. It works well. Really nothing to complain about here, I guess. So yeah, we'll just get to the next segment. This is the RSeat Buttkicker Mount. And it's pretty substantial when you pick it up in hand. It's about 6.5 pounds, a little over that, or 3 kilograms for everybody else in the world. It is made from a 4 millimeter plate that's been bent. You can see that. And it has supports in the middle here that are, let's see, this is 1 3/4 inches. This is about 1 3/8 inches, or 32 mil and 42 mil. And these are pipes. I'm just curious why they went with this design. And they're mounted with M8 bolts on either side. I'm just wondering if that's some kind of a tuning element for the transducer shock waves when it's vibrating, and maybe it helps magnify the shock waves to the seat. I don't know. But it's curious. When I see something like that, it's, yeah, I have to think, what is that for? Anyway, so this mounts underneath the seat on the seat mount assembly that we've already seen if you've been watching the video. Now, currently there is a flat plate across where this will go. So this replaces the flat plate that we had originally on the seat and still is under the seat for mine. And yeah, that plate is just made for spreading out the side mounts, or the side plates of the mounting assembly, so that they are parallel with the chassis. Because if your seat's kind of thin, then you tighten everything up, those things are kind of move into each other, which takes it out of square. So that plate is there so you can loosen the bolts and let them fall back out to where they're straight again, then tighten the bolts back down. Anyway, this would replace that plate in the same, it would perform the same job, but with the addition, of course, of putting a butt kicker on this. Speaking of butt kickers, it covers the Buttkicker Advance, the LFE, the Concert, and also the Mini Concert and the Mini LFE. So it covers a lot of different transducers. So even if you have your own custom one, I'm sure you could just drill a hole in here and mount it, and it'll do the same thing. So yeah, I just want to show you. I won't be putting this on because I don't have a butt kicker. So I just wanted to show you what's available, and they did send it to me. Again, just like all the other parts that I'm pulling out of the box here for this RSeat assembly, it's definitely a stout piece of kit here. So let's have a look at the final configuration I'll be using for testing here, and some thoughts on how these things are mounted. First, let's talk about the shifter mount. The shifter mount itself, like everything on this rig, is very stout. I was able to put my H pattern shifter, the ProSim, the very large one, and it did fit as far as the length is concerned, but the bolt holes did not line up at all. I would have to drill some new holes, and I would have to remove this side piece over here that you see the trackball sitting on. Now, I did have my sequential shifter that would fit fine. I do have it angled a little bit. Well, actually, maybe about 10 degrees, 15 degrees. But notice how the brake itself, the handbrake, the Husingville handbrake here, that thing is angled more like 20 degrees, maybe even 25. And the reason is, those are the only holes I could find without drilling some. And of course, if this was something I'd be keeping all the time and using all the time, I'd probably just drill a hole. But I was able to get 3 bolts in. You can see I got 2 up front here and 1 in the back. And the sequential shifter has 1 in the front and back as per its design. And this is a very hefty little shifter here from SG Racing. It's very thick aluminum plates. It has full-size control, has some great tactile feedback to it. So I'll be banging on that pretty good. But when I turn, or rather when I'm turning in dirt with this handbrake and using the handbrake to get the rear end to come around, you'll probably see some motion in this, or some kind of movement. But look at the angle I'm pulling on it, though. I'm sitting in the seat here, and I'm reaching over there at that angle to pull on it. So I'm putting some lateral force on that mount that typically I think shouldn't be there if you mounted it straighter. I would probably drill another hole, or maybe even 2 holes, and try to get it straightened out a little bit, because you can see the difference in the angle between the shifter itself and the handbrake. This other shelf over here, you can see how far away that's sitting from the controls I have mounted already. Now, I know that you're supposed to put like a handbrake over there for a Thrustmaster handbrake, or, you know, you can put whatever you want to on it, but it is going to be a bit of a reach compared to this. Even this, you can see the gap I have between my seat here is a little bit more of a reach than I'm normally used to. Completely workable, though, but things that I just observe and like to point out to you guys so you can consider all angles, decide whether this is something you would want. So it makes a great trackball shelf, though, because I can use my trackball, and I use it a lot, obviously, when I'm configuring things in the simulator or in the game or whichever game you're in. So yeah, this is probably going to see some movement, and I'll talk about that in the driving segment. The tablet mount, the button, I didn't take the button box mount part off, or the extra tablet mount. You could take that off, but it tucks away pretty good right next to the motor over here, as you can see. So that's kind of out of the way, even though the arm does stick out a bit, but not any more, or not much more anyway, than what we have sticking out over here on this shelf. So we're okay there on the width thing. And the reason I'm talking about that, I'm going to float over here on the other side, and you can see how far this keyboard mount sticks out. Now you can fold this out of the way and fold it back around, but it's still going to be a lot of room here to swing this around and get it situated so it's out of your way. It's just a big assembly, and I think they could go smaller with these arm lengths and not really have any problem with the keyboard still going underneath the wheel. So when you're sitting here, you can still type this thing. I'm going to try to push it under here. So yeah, anyway, so yeah, I think that they could knock off about 10 inches or so on this tray itself just for the keyboard. You know, if you want to put a mouse on there, maybe leave a little bit of room for that. But I always use a trackball because the mouse is hard to move around in simulators. But you can see this, the structure, these things are so long, no matter how you fold them up, they're going to take some space up. And that's another thing to consider. If you have a narrow place that you're going to be putting your cockpit, you might not want to get this keyboard mount, or maybe find some other solution for the keyboard mount. But they could do something a little shorter here, and I think it would still work fine. Right. The motor mount. Sturdy as can be. This is a very solid motor mount for a direct drive. I got a 20 Newton meter midge on here. And I've actually been testing it a little bit already, and yeah, solid as a rock. Yeah, this is a great mount. And I'm all about having a very stiff mount for your direct drive force feedback wheel motors, because the stiffer it is, the more tactile feedback you get from your motor, because you don't have any loss in flex. So the details are there that normally if you have too much flex, you'll lose them. Now I do have an extension out here. You can see how far the steering wheel is sticking out into the seat, but it works fine. You'll see me driving it. It's a great fit for me. But when you have extensions on these things, you start putting more leverage on the mount itself. But even then, if I'm way back here, if I'm sitting here or standing here and pulling on this, trying to get it to move, I can't really sense anything moving here. And I don't think you can see it either. The whole thing is moving. I'm going to slide the cockpit over to the side if I keep pulling on it. So again, they've done a great job with this mount. I really like what they did there. Monitor mount, well, I'd like to be able to get this monitor pushed in forward towards the wheel. And even if I didn't have the extension, it's still a bit far back than what I would like to have. But you know, any kind of fixed monitor mount, there's usually going to be some limitations for the depth of your monitor, how far you can get it towards the steering wheel, just because of the nature of how these things work. So if you really want to get monitors close, I would get a freestanding monitor mount and just slide it up to the back of the wheel. And I think you'd have a better experience. At least I think you would. Some people might like it further back, but if you're going to have it further back, that's when you need to go up in your monitor sizes. Further back away from your cockpit, the bigger monitor you're going to need to feel the same kind of way as far as the immersion. Anyway, but the monitor mount is very stiff, no flex when I was using that. And that's just, you know, the theme for this cockpit. Now we have our Mecha Cup 1s mounted here, as you saw before. And again, I've already been driving some heel and toe on this. Yeah, solid as a rock. I don't see any flex in anything. You feel everything that the pedals are doing under your foot. So yeah, again, very good mount here. Only thing is, well, before I get to that, the mount is also higher off the floorboard than any prefab cockpit that I've seen so far at the SRG. And what that does is it raises the pedal so where your heel is resting is very close. Yeah, maybe about, I'm thinking 3 inches, maybe, 75, 80 millimeters higher where your butt's actually sitting in the seat to where your heel is resting, which is much better than any prefab cockpit I've had in here to date. Now, what I was getting ready to say is, now because they've raised this plate, then there can be clearance issues, as you saw before. And you've been watching the video in the segments. It's a long video, so if you look at the pedal tray parts, then you'll see when the pedals are mounted, how that turned out with different pedals just being too tall. They were just too tall for the bottom mount. That monitor mount that goes on there actually makes it stick out a little bit more, but still, yeah, I would like to see this roll bar 30 to 40 millimeters higher. I think that would be the cure for that. And then you would have plenty of room under there for even the largest high-end pedal sets for use. And of course, even if you raise this up, we got plenty of, I could lower this wheel mount down a lot. And the monitor mount's actually, where the monitor sitting on the monitor mount is actually almost at its highest position. You can see there, we got a lot of slots down here we can use all the way down. So plenty of downward motion available here, or room to move things. So yeah, I think that's about it. The seat is on the sliders, and the sliders are actually pretty good here. I don't really sense any, or a lot of, this is a little bit of lash in the teeth where they engage in the slider assembly. Of course, they have to have some lash or they wouldn't be able to slide next to each other and move around and then slide back in. So pretty good on that. The pedals, I don't have any lash in that. So these sliders are doing a pretty good job. Now the seat itself, if you saw the seat part where I was talking about it, there is some flex in this seat. And I said before, it seemed to be kind of a thinner shell. This is their entry-level RSeat brand seat. So I kind of was expecting that. And you'll see when I'm driving this, and I'll talk about why I'm driving, that there's some flex. When I'm doing heel and toe, I'm slapping the throttle and putting it on the brake at the same time. I kind of jump around in the seat when I'm doing that, my body, because of the motion of slapping that paddle around. So yeah, you'll see some flex in that, I think. So we'll actually talk about it once we get to the driving segment, and that's what we're going to do next. We're at Sebring and iRacing, and we are in the Ford Super V8 car. So first off, this is a good car for doing downshifting and pounding on a sequential, which I'm doing on purpose to test the shifter mount. And I think you can see when you watch me do the shifting throughout while I'm talking to you here that, yeah, that sequential is not causing the mount to move at all, at least that I can detect. And certainly couldn't detect it when I was actually using it in hand. Very nice tactile feedback from it. And it's not at a bad angle. It's a pretty decent angle to reach out and grab it. So I'm not really pulling to the left hard like you'll see when I grab that handbrake when we get into the dirt. So yeah, nice solid, like was said before. I really don't have any complaints about this mount. It's doing a good job. It's really overbuilt. I mean, it's just such a heavy piece. And again, that's kind of the theme with this cockpit in general. Now, the motor mount itself, solid as a rock. I can't feel anything there as far as any motion or movement when I'm turning the wheel. And I got the force feedback at 20 Newton meters, which is 100%, and trying to get it to flex, or so I could see some flex in any of the video that I shot, and I couldn't see any. So yeah, confidence is high. You're getting everything that you can get out of as far as force feedback performance on the detail that you get out of your wheelbase. You'll get it out of this system. The pedal tray, as you've been watching that on the downshift, especially the long downshifts when I'm doing like going down like 4 gears at once or 5 gears at once, yeah, you don't see any movement at all here. This is definitely a stiff pedal tray. Nothing's going on. It's very, very stout. And yeah, you can feel everything as far as tactile feedback from those pedals underfoot. So it's easy to get in a rhythm with your pedals when there's nothing moving around them as far as relative to you. Now, if you're in a motion system, the motion system's moving, but still you're inside the motion system. So still you get the same kind of feel. But yeah, very solid here. No complaints, except for maybe the reach for the pedals. You know, that roll bar, I've commented a couple times during this review. I'd like to see that like another 40 millimeters taller, so it can accept other brake pedals. And if you saw the pedal tray portion, you know what I'm talking about. I've put some different pedal sets in there and showed you there was some clearance issues on the bottom where the monitor mount is attached. Right. So what else can we talk about here? We got a good pedal tray. We got good shifter mount. We got a good motor mount. Ergonomics. Okay, well, pretty good ergonomics here. That's because the pedal tray is so high and the seat is lower. So again, I like to see personally another 3-inch drop on the seat so I can get my preferred position. Now watch when I'm using this handbrake here. There's actually some movement in this shifter mount I detect. Look at it and make up your own mind. There's a little bit of movement there. But again, I can't really fault the mount too much because look at the angle that handbrake is when I'm using it. I mean, I'm pulling that thing to the left at a like 25 degree, maybe even 30 degree angle. And that's not normally how I would have a handbrake set up. So I'm really putting some lateral force on there that normally should not be there if you have your controls mounted properly. But it is moving a little bit. But considering how much pressure I'm putting on that handbrake when I pull it, it's not moving that much, I think, because I'm really yanking on that thing. I'm trying to get it to move because I like to go back to my video when I'm done doing my driving and when I'm putting stress on controls and take a look at it and see what's going on. Anyway, so overall, I really don't have any complaints about this. You know, I'd like a stiffer seat. If I was going to do this myself, then I would order a Sparco seat or something that is stiffer, maybe an NRG seat. You know, the Prism is pretty stiff. That shell is done pretty well. It's pretty thick. But this one's just a little bit on the thin side, and you can even see when I'm driving, you see that moving around a bit. And when I hit the brakes and things like that. So, you know, it is what it is. It's, like I said, the in-house brand seat, and I kind of expected that once I had it on the bench and I was kind of squeezing on it and feeling how flexy it was or how stiff it was. So overall, again, you know, this is a stout cockpit. You're going to get a good experience as far as sitting in it and driving because it's so stiff. And stiff is good when you're in a cockpit and driving and you're trying to use full-size controls. It really adds to the immersion. You know, if your wheelbase is flexing and robbing you of force feedback detail from an expensive wheelbase, that's just not good. So you want to make sure whatever you do get, it has something that's very solid to mount that to. And this is one of them. And this is, like I said before, I may have said before, I can't remember, it's such a long review, that this is the stiffest, hands down, motor mount that I've ever tested in a prefabricated type of cockpit. Not in a profile cockpit, but in a prefab. But I tell you, it rivals profile cockpits, to be honest. I mean, I can't tell any difference. It's just very solid. And that's very important to me, and probably should be important to you if you're moving up to higher force direct drive wheel solutions. All right, so that's pretty much the driving segment. So what we'll do is go ahead and get on to the final thoughts. Final thoughts on the P1 cockpit from the guys at RSeat. This cockpit is manufactured in Bulgaria. All metal fabrication is done in-house, which allows RSeat the opportunity to maintain their preferred quality control levels. The P1 arrived well packaged with no scratches or dents. A first for me, as any other prefabricated cockpit I have tested came with some kind of damage caused by shipping service employees. The P1 is constructed of steel plate. Each part's finish is well done, with no defects that I could find. All elements of this cockpit's construction are of a stout nature. They are sporting abundant welds on every piece that requires it. They use a unique process for bending the metal curves, the laser cut slots on the back of the bend providing a stress relief area where the bends are made. The main chassis assembly is constructed from steel plate in a boxed rail configuration similar to those found on a real vehicle's chassis, which provides a stiff base platform that can support the rest of the cockpit's assembled parts. The shifter mount is very heavy and stiff once mounted. It did not move when I was using my sequential shifter. I did observe a small amount of movement when using my handbrake, but I was pulling it at an angle dictated by the available mounting holes. I would drill some holes in the mounting plate to change that if it were my daily driver. The pedal tray system is also very heavy and stiff. When using my heel and toe shifting technique, I could not sense or see any movement at all. The height of the tray did make for a more ergonomic driving position than most other prefab cockpits I have tested, with their truck driver-like drop from the seat to the pedal tray area. But this added height also causes an issue when mounting some of my high-end, full-size pedal systems. I would like to see RSeat raise the height of their front roll bar mount section at least another 2 inches or 50 millimeters to allow these pedal sets with their bases to have the clearance they need. The wheelbase mount is also a heavy, well-built unit. It fits most available force feedback servo motors, but I did have to notch out the bracket a bit to allow me to mount my 20 Nm midge motors connectors on the side where they would not interfere with viewing the monitor, something I think RSeat should start to do on all of these mounts moving forward. The RSeat branded seat included in my kit did have some flex in it due to the thin fiberglass shell used in its construction. I would opt for another option here. Overall, I think RSeat is making a very good cockpit in the P1. I did have some complaints about some of the parts, but one cannot argue the sheer mass and well-constructed elements that the P1 as a whole has, which translates into a very stiff platform to drive in. The P1 is the best performing prefabricated cockpit I have tested to date, and considering the price point, anything less would be a great disappointment. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and if you would like to help support what I do here at the SRG, visit my website at simracinggarage.com.